Welcome to the TrackPad's weekly military podcast, your go-to source for uncovering the remarkable history and captivating stories of military life and beyond. Hosted by myself, Dr. Jason Edwards, U.S. Army retired. This episode is part of a multimedia feature. Be sure to visit newsletter.trackpads.com for an in-depth article complete with photos and videos. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the more than 100,000 people who follow my content at jason-edwards.me. where I share military videos and other engaging topics. You can also browse my published works by visiting my author page at militaryauthor.me. In this episode, battleships were once the pinnacle of naval power, embodying industrial strength and technological innovation as they dominated the seas from the 19th to the mid-20th centuries. These massive vessels played critical roles in world wars, from enforcing roadblocks to engaging in legendary battles like Jutland and Leyte Gulf, all while adapting to evolving threats like submarines and air power. Though their era has passed, their legacy endures as symbols of maritime heritage and human ingenuity. Let's get started with today's topic: Titans of the Seas, the rise, dominance, and legacy of battleships. For centuries, battleships have stood as icons of maritime power, engineering marvels that dominated the seas and reshaped history. From their wooden origins in the Age of Sail to the steel giants of the 20th century, these vessels embodied the military and industrial might of the nations that built them. Battleships were more than just tools of war. They were symbols of national pride and political ambition, often influencing diplomatic strategies and altering global balances of power. Their imposing silhouettes and thunderous broadsides made them legendary in naval history, even as their roles evolved in response to new technologies and threats. The rise of the battleship coincided with major technological revolutions that transformed naval warfare. Innovations such as steam propulsion, rifled naval guns, and reinforced steel armor gave rise to ships capable of unprecedented firepower and durability. The launch of the HMS Dreadnought in 1906 marked a turning point, rendering all previous battleship designs obsolete and igniting a global arms race. As nations vied for supremacy on the high seas, battleships became the centerpiece of their fleets, tasked with achieving control of vital trade routes and defending strategic territories. Yet these advancements also introduced vulnerabilities as emerging threats like submarines, torpedoes, and aircraft began to challenge their dominance. Throughout the 20th century, battleships played pivotal roles in some of the most significant conflicts in history. In World War I, they enforced blockades, engaged in fleet actions, and demonstrated their might in battles like Jutland, where their strengths and limitations were laid bare. By World War II, the role of the battleships had shifted as air power and aircraft carriers redefined naval strategy. Despite declining prominence, these ships proved indispensable in convoy protection, amphibious operations, and key engagements such as Leyte Gulf and Guadalcanal. The legacy of battleships is found in their wartime contributions and the legends and stories surrounding them. Iconic ships like Germany's Bismarck, Japan's Yamato, and Britain's HMS Hood have captured the imagination of historians and the public alike, symbolizing both the grandeur and tragedy of naval warfare. Each ship's story reflects the ambitions, strategies, and sacrifices of the nations that built and sailed them. Whether they triumphed in battle or met their end in fiery destruction, these ships left an indelible mark in history, serving as reminders of the power and peril of technological innovation. Though the age of the battleship is long past, their influence endures as a testament to human ingenuity and the relentless pursuit of dominance on the seas. Modern navies may rely on aircraft carriers, submarines, and missile systems, but the battleship remains a potent symbol of naval heritage. They represent a time when nations poured their resources and hopes into these floating fortresses, viewing them as the ultimate expression of strength. The pre-World War I naval arms race. The late 19th and early 20th centuries witnessed an unprecedented naval arms race, driven by the ambitions of global powers to dominate the seas. With its historic maritime supremacy, Britain adhered to the two-power standard, a policy dictating that its navy must be larger than the next two largest navies combined. This policy aimed to ensure British dominance and deter potential adversaries, particularly as other nations began expanding their fleets. Under Kaiser Wilhelm II's leadership, Germany aggressively sought to challenge British naval supremacy, sparking intense competition. Wilhelm's desire to build a fleet capable of rivaling the Royal Navy strained Anglo-German relations and set the stage for increased tension throughout Europe. Japan's emergence as a formidable naval power added another dimension to the global arms race. Following its victory over Russia in the Russo-Japanese War from 1904 to 1905, Japan established itself as the dominant force in the Pacific. The war demonstrated Japan's ability to employ modern naval tactics effectively, further elevating its status on the world stage. Japan's growing navy symbolized its aspirations to rival Western powers, contributing to the broader competition for naval dominance. This period of naval buildup, driven by both European and non-European powers, reshaped the balance of power and intensified the geopolitical rivalry leading up to World War I. The influence of Alfred Thayer Mahan's theories. The writings of American naval strategist Alfred Thayer Mahan profoundly shaped naval thought during this period. His seminal work, The Influence of Sea Power Upon History, 1660 to 1783, emphasized the decisive role of naval power in determining the outcomes of wars and the fates of nations. Mahan argued that battleships were essential for projecting power, securing trade routes, and achieving national greatness. His theories resonated with political and military leaders worldwide, who increasingly viewed powerful navies as critical to maintaining influence on the global stage. Naval academies worldwide embraced Mahan's ideas, incorporating them into their curricula and reshaping naval strategy. The emphasis on achieving decisive fleet engagements became a cornerstone of naval doctrine, encouraging the construction of larger and more powerful battleships. Nations sought to establish maritime dominance for military purposes and to control vital economic lifelines, such as colonial trade routes. Mahan's theories provided a strategic framework that justified the massive investments in naval fleets, further accelerating the arms race. The Dreadnought-class battleships. Introduction of the Dreadnought-class battleships in the early 20th century fundamentally changed the nature of naval warfare. The British HMS Dreadnought, launched in 1906, was the first of its kind, featuring an all-big-gun armament and steam turbine engines that offered greater speed and power than any previous warship. This design revolutionized naval architecture, concentrating unprecedented firepower in fewer but more powerful guns. Dreadnoughts rendered earlier battleship designs obsolete almost overnight, forcing nations to reevaluate their fleets and embark on a costly race to modernize. The Dreadnought sparked an international arms race as countries scrambled to build their own versions of this game-changing warship. Germany, already competing with Britain, intensified its efforts to produce dreadnoughts, fueling tensions between the two nations. Smaller powers, such as Japan and Italy, also sought to acquire these advanced ships, underscoring their growing importance in naval strategy. The rapid obsolescence of pre-dreadnought battleships meant that nations had to prioritize dreadnought production, driving further competition and straining national budgets. Growth in naval fleets and strategic significance. The expansion of naval fleets during this period not only heightened tensions among rival powers, but also transformed battleships into potent symbols of national pride. As countries poured resources into building larger and more advanced fleets, battleships became markers of technological prowess and industrial capacity. Nations showcased their newest warships in grand naval reviews, using them to project strength and assert their place in the global hierarchy. The possession of a formidable battleship fleet was seen as essential to maintaining diplomatic leverage and deterring aggression. Naval buildups profoundly impacted global politics, influencing alliances and exacerbating pre-existing rivalries. Britain's efforts to counter Germany's naval ambitions deepened the divide between the two nations, while Japan's rising naval power shaped its relationships with both Western powers and its regional neighbors. Efforts to limit the escalation, such as the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, often fell short as nations remained unwilling to relinquish their claims to maritime supremacy. By the eve of World War I, battleships were not only instruments of war, but also central to the diplomatic and strategic calculations of the world's leading powers. Battleships in World War I. Battleships played a crucial strategic role in World War I, particularly in enforcing blockades and supporting fleet actions. The British Grand Fleet, based primarily at Scapa Flow, was instrumental in maintaining a naval blockade against Germany. This blockade was designed to strangle Germany's economy by cutting off its vital supplies of food, raw materials, and military equipment, significantly weakening its war effort. The presence of Britain's massive fleet effectively closed off the North Sea, forcing German merchant ships to rely on neutral ports or risk destruction. The German High Seas Fleet, although powerful, was unable to break the British blockade despite several attempts. German naval commanders recognized that a direct confrontation with the Grand Fleet could lead to catastrophic losses and instead focused on limited sorties and raids. While these actions occasionally inflicted damage, they failed to achieve the decisive breakthrough needed to restore Germany's access to global trade. This strategic imbalance ensured that the British Navy maintained dominance throughout much of the war, illustrating the immense value of battleships in economic warfare. However, direct engagements between the rival fleets were limited due to the growing threat of submarines and naval mines. Both sides recognized the vulnerability of battleships to these newer weapons, which could bypass traditional defenses and inflict devastating damage. Submarines in particular forced navies to adopt more cautious strategies, as the risk of losing capital ships outweighed the potential gains from large-scale engagements. As a result, battleships often spent much of the war patrolling or defending key positions rather than engaging in the decisive battles envisioned by pre-war strategists. The Battle of Jutland. The Battle of Jutland, fought between May 31st and June 1st, 1916, was the largest naval battle of World War I and involved over 250 ships from the British and German fleets. This epic clash highlighted the strengths and limitations of battleships in modern naval warfare. The British Grand Fleet, under Admiral John Jellicoe, and the German High Seas Fleet, led by Vice Admiral Reinhard Scheer, sought to achieve control of the North Sea through a decisive encounter. Despite the scale of the engagement, neither side achieved a clear tactical victory. From a strategic perspective, however, the British blockade remained intact, making Jutland a success for the Allies. Germany's inability to break British naval dominance ensured that the economic stranglehold on its war effort continued unabated. The battle demonstrated the immense firepower and resilience of Dreadnought-class battleships, but also exposed their limitations. Despite heavy casualties and damage on both sides, the engagement failed to deliver the kind of decisive outcome that pre-war naval theorists had anticipated. Jutland also underscored the changing nature of naval warfare. The scale of the battle revealed the difficulties of coordinating large fleets and maintaining effective communication in the heat of combat. Furthermore, it highlighted the increasing importance of reconnaissance as both sides struggled to locate and engage enemy forces effectively. This battle served as a wake-up call for navies worldwide, prompting them to reevaluate traditional strategies and adapt them to the realities of modern naval combat. Limitations of battleships in World War I. Despite their dominance as the era's most powerful warships, battleships faced significant limitations during World War I. The rise of new weapons, such as torpedoes and naval mines, posed unprecedented threats to these heavily armored vessels. Mines in particular proved highly effective at controlling sea lanes and denying access to critical areas. The sinking of battleships, such as the HMS Audacious, which struck a mine in 1914, demonstrated how these relatively simple devices could neutralize even the most advanced warships. Submarines presented another challenge, exploiting their stealth and mobility to attack battleships and other capital ships with devastating torpedoes. The German U-boat campaign forced the Royal Navy to adopt convoy systems and deploy destroyers for anti-submarine protection, reducing the opportunities for battleships to operate freely. Furthermore, the cautious strategies employed by naval commanders limited the chances of large-scale engagements. The fear of losing valuable capital ships often led to indecisive actions, further diminishing the role of battleships in direct combat. The difficulty in engaging elusive targets like submarines and fast-moving destroyers further exposed the limitations of battleships. These slower, heavily armed vessels were designed for line-of-battle engagements against similar ships, but struggled to adapt to the asymmetric threats posed by smaller, more agile adversaries. As a result, battleships often found themselves relegated to supporting roles, such as coastal bombardment or fleet defense, rather than dominating the seas as envisioned. Innovations and lessons learned during World War I. World War I prompted significant innovations in naval strategy and ship design, many of which were responses to the limitations exposed during the conflict. One notable development was the rise of battlecruisers, faster, more lightly armored vessels that combined the firepower of battleships with greater speed and maneuverability. Although battlecruisers sacrificed protection for agility, they demonstrated the importance of versatility in modern naval warfare, paving the way for more balanced designs in the future. The war also highlighted the need for improved fleet coordination and reconnaissance capabilities. The use of scout planes and airships during naval operations provided vital intelligence, enabling fleets to locate and track enemy forces more effectively. This recognition of air power's potential marked the beginning of a shift toward integrated naval air operations, which would become increasingly important in subsequent conflicts. Additionally, the experience of World War I underscored the importance of technological adaptability. Advances in gunnery, fire control systems, and propulsion reflected the lessons learned from early battles. Navies began investing in better communication systems, such as wireless telegraphy, to improve coordination and reduce the chaos of large-scale engagements. These innovations ensured that battleships, while no longer unrivaled, continued to play a critical role in the evolving landscape of naval warfare. Battleships in World War II, the Atlantic Theater. In the Atlantic theater of World War II, battleships played a crucial role in protecting Allied shipping lanes from German surface raiders and submarines. These heavily armed vessels served as powerful escorts for convoys carrying vital supplies to Britain and the Soviet Union. Their presence alone acted as a deterrent, discouraging German capital ships like the Bismarck or Scharnhorst from attacking vulnerable merchant ships. Battleships offered unparalleled firepower, providing convoy commanders with confidence against surface threats, even if their direct engagements were limited. The battleship's strategic role in securing supply lines was essential to the Allied war effort. Britain, heavily reliant on imports for food, fuel, and war material, depended on unimpeded shipping routes across the Atlantic. German efforts to disrupt these routes through commerce raiding threatened to cripple the British economy and military capabilities. Allied battleships not only patrolled these routes, but also hunted down German surface raiders, ensuring that critical supplies reached their destinations. In doing so, these ships helped maintain the flow of resources needed to sustain the Allied war effort on multiple fronts. While battleships were instrumental in convoy protection, their effectiveness was often challenged by the shifting dynamics of naval warfare. The increasing use of submarines and long-range aircraft by the Germans created a multidimensional threat that battleships were not fully equipped to counter. Nonetheless, these ships remained integral to the Allied naval strategy, working alongside destroyers, corvettes, and aircraft carriers to safeguard the vital Atlantic supply lines. Their ability to project power and withstand punishment provided a critical backbone to the convoy system during the darkest days of the Battle of the Atlantic. The showdown between the Bismarck and the Hood. Few naval encounters in history captured the public's imagination as much as the clash between the German battleship Bismarck and the British battlecruiser HMS Hood. The sinking of the Hood during the Battle of the Denmark Strait in May 1941 was a devastating blow to British morale. Known as the Pride of the Royal Navy, Hood was destroyed in a matter of minutes, with the loss of all but 3 of her crew. The shock of this loss galvanized the British Navy into action, launching an unprecedented hunt for the Bismarck. The pursuit of the Bismarck showcased the challenges and triumphs of modern naval warfare. After days of relentless searching, aided by reconnaissance aircraft, British forces cornered the Bismarck in the Atlantic. In a final engagement, the Royal Navy's battleships, including HMS Rodney and HMS King George V, unleashed their firepower and crippled the German vessel. The eventual sinking of the Bismarck underscored the importance of air reconnaissance, coordination among naval assets, and the combined firepower of the fleet. This dramatic encounter highlighted both the enduring strength of battleships and the reliance on evolving technologies and strategies. The story of the Bismarck and Hood became legendary, symbolizing the intense rivalry and stakes of naval warfare in the Atlantic. It also demonstrated the shifting role of battleships, as air power and radar played increasingly significant roles in determining the outcome of naval engagements. Despite their technological advancements, battleships like Bismarck were no longer invincible, a reality that would define their operations throughout the war. Coastal bombardment and amphibious operations. Battleships played a pivotal role in supporting Allied amphibious operations during World War II, especially during the D-Day invasion in June of 1944. The massive naval bombardment of German defenses along the Normandy coast was critical to the success of the landings. Ships like USS Nevada and HMS Warspite fired their heavy guns at entrenched German positions, neutralizing key fortifications and clearing the way for infantry and armored units to advance inland. These bombardments demonstrated the battleship's enduring value in providing precise and overwhelming firepower. Beyond Normandy, battleships continued to support Allied operations in France and the Low Countries. During operations to liberate Cherbourg and other critical ports, their heavy artillery was instrumental in breaking German resistance. The versatility of battleships allowed them to engage targets deep inland, using advanced fire control systems to adjust their aim and support ground forces effectively. This coordination between naval and land units underscored the importance of battleships in combined arms warfare, even as air power gained prominence. While aircraft dominated much of the conflict, the reliability of battleships and amphibious operations ensured their relevance throughout the European campaigns. Their ability to sustain prolonged bombardments and their resilience against counterattacks made them indispensable in securing beachheads and supporting troop movements. Despite their declining role in fleet engagements, battleships proved invaluable in these specialized missions, demonstrating their adaptability in an era of rapid technological change. Limitations and the rise of air power. Despite their strengths, battleships faced significant limitations during World War II, particularly in the Atlantic theater. Submarines and air-launched torpedoes posed persistent threats that even the most heavily armored battleships struggled to counter. German U-boats, operating in wolf packs, targeted Allied ships with devastating effect, forcing battleships to operate cautiously. The sinking of HMS Royal Oak by a German submarine in Scapa Flow early in the war highlighted the vulnerability of even the most prestigious capital ships to underwater threats. Air power also played a growing role in diminishing the dominance of battleships. Aircraft carriers, with their ability to project force far beyond the range of naval guns, emerged as the new capital ships of modern fleets. Battleships increasingly found themselves relegated to supporting roles, providing anti-aircraft cover and shore bombardment rather than dominating fleet engagements. The shift in naval strategy from surface battles to air-sea operations marked the beginning of the end for battleships as the centerpiece of naval power. Battleships in World War II, the Pacific Theater. The attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, marked a turning point in naval history and dealt a devastating blow to the U.S. Pacific Fleet. Japan's surprise assault targeted battleships as symbols of American naval power, crippling 8 of them, including the USS Arizona and the USS Oklahoma, which were completely lost. The attack revealed the vulnerability of battleships to airstrikes, but it also underscored their importance in the public and military imagination. Despite the heavy losses, several battleships, such as the USS Nevada and the USS West Virginia, were salvaged, repaired, and eventually returned to action, symbolizing the Navy's resilience and determination. As the U.S. Navy rebuilt its fleet, the focus gradually shifted from battleships to aircraft carriers as the dominant force in naval warfare. The devastation at Pearl Harbor highlighted the need for a more flexible and mobile fleet capable of projecting power across vast distances. While battleships continue to play significant roles, particularly in shore bombardments and convoy protection, the strategic emphasis on carrier-based operations became increasingly apparent. The attack demonstrated the obsolescence of relying solely on battleships for fleet supremacy, pushing the U.S. Navy toward a more diversified approach to naval strategy. Despite their diminished role, battleships remained critical to the Navy's recovery and early operations in the Pacific. Ships like the USS Maryland and the USS Tennessee, which survived Pearl Harbor with minimal damage, participated in key campaigns, providing firepower and support for carrier task forces. These vessels proved that battleships still had a place in the evolving theater of war, even as their dominance was being overshadowed by newer technologies and tactics. Pearl Harbor thus marked both the beginning of the end for battleships as fleet flagships and their adaptation to new roles in modern naval warfare. Key engagements: Leyte Gulf and Guadalcanal. The Battle of Leyte Gulf in October 1944 was the largest naval engagement in history and underscored the enduring power of battleships in surface combat. This massive conflict involved over 200 ships from the U.S. and Japanese fleets and included decisive engagements where battleships played crucial roles. In the Surigao Strait, American battleships, including the USS West Virginia and the USS Maryland, delivered devastating broadsides against the Japanese Southern Force, achieving a rare instance of traditional battleship line-of-battle victory. This action demonstrated the continued relevance of battleships in achieving dominance during fleet encounters. Earlier in the war, the night battles at Guadalcanal in late 1942 showcased the battleship's firepower and resilience in chaotic close-range engagements. The first and second naval battles of Guadalcanal were marked by ferocious fighting, with American battleships like USS Washington delivering decisive blows to Japanese forces. These battles highlighted the importance of battleships in supporting surface action groups, particularly in the challenging conditions of night combat. Their heavy armor and firepower allowed them to withstand punishment and inflict significant damage, securing control of critical areas in the Solomon Islands campaign. While these engagements emphasized the battleship's value in surface combat, they also underscored the limitations imposed by new threats, such as air power and submarine attacks. The Japanese fleet, despite its reliance on battleships like Yamato, struggled to counter the growing dominance of U.S. carrier task forces. Leyte Gulf and Guadalcanal were pivotal not only in securing Allied victories, but also in demonstrating the shifting balance of naval power in favor of air-sea operations. Supporting amphibious landings and bombardments. One of the most vital roles of battleships in the Pacific theater was their support of amphibious landings through pre-landing bombardments. During the island-hopping campaigns, battleships like USS Missouri and USS Iowa served as mobile artillery platforms delivering sustained fire against Japanese fortifications. These bombardments were critical in softening enemy defenses on islands such as Iwo Jima and Okinawa, where entrenched positions posed significant challenges to invading forces. The ability to deliver precision fire over long distances made battleships indispensable for amphibious operations. In addition to their firepower, battleships provided flexibility and endurance, supporting ground forces long after the initial landings. Their heavy guns could be directed against enemy supply lines, reinforcements, and fortified positions deep inland. This capability proved invaluable in campaigns like the invasion of the Philippines, where battleships supported prolonged engagements to secure strategic objectives. Despite the growing dominance of air power, the physical presence and firepower of battleships continued to make them a key asset in the Pacific. The continued use of battleships in these roles reflected their adaptability in an era of rapid technological change. While carriers dominated the headlines, battleships provided the backbone of fire support for many operations, ensuring that ground forces could advance with reduced casualties. Their contributions to amphibious warfare underscored their enduring relevance even as their traditional roles in fleet engagements diminished. The decline of battleships in Pacific operations. As the Pacific War progressed, the dominance of aircraft carriers became increasingly apparent, relegating battleships to secondary roles. The ability of carrier-based aircraft to deliver devastating strikes from long range rendered battleships less effective in fleet engagements. The sinking of major battleships, such as the Japanese Yamato and Musashi, by a carrier aircraft, highlighted the vulnerability of these massive ships to aerial assaults. By the latter stages of the war, battleships were often assigned to escort carrier task forces or provide anti-aircraft defense rather than serving as the centerpiece of the fleet. The effectiveness of carrier planes in delivering decisive blows further diminished the strategic importance of battleships. Operations such as the Battle of Midway and the Marianas Turkey Shoot demonstrated that air power had become the primary means of achieving naval supremacy. Battleships, while still powerful, were increasingly unable to match the speed and reach of carrier-based operations. Their slow speed and limited versatility made them less suitable for the fast-paced and dynamic nature of Pacific warfare. The final battleship engagements of the war marked the end of an era. While ships like the USS Missouri played prominent roles in the war's closing months, including hosting the Japanese surrender in Tokyo Bay, their role as fleet flagships had been definitively replaced by carriers. The Pacific theater demonstrated the rise of air-sea power as the new foundation of naval strategy, leaving battleships as relics of a bygone age. Despite their decline, their contributions to the war effort cemented their legacy as titans of the seas. Iconic battleships of history. Bismarck, Germany's maritime titan. The German battleship Bismarck was one of the most famous and feared naval vessels of World War II, symbolizing the might of the Kriegsmarine. Launched in 1939, Bismarck was the largest and most powerful battleship ever built by Germany, featuring advanced armor, high-speed capability, and 8 15-inch guns capable of devastating firepower. Its operational history, though brief, was dramatic and cemented its place in naval legend. The ship's most famous engagement occurred in May of 1941, during the Battle of the Denmark Strait, where Bismarck sank the HMS Hood, the pride of the British Royal Navy. The sinking of Hood shocked the British public and Navy, prompting an all-out pursuit of Bismarck. Damaged during the initial battle, Bismarck attempted to reach safety in occupied France, but was relentlessly hunted by British forces. On May 27, 1941, after being disabled by a combination of air and surface attacks, the Bismarck was finally sunk by the Royal Navy. Its loss marked the end of an ambitious German surface fleet strategy, as the Kriegsmarine shifted its focus to submarine warfare. Bismarck remains a potent symbol of both technological ingenuity and the vulnerabilities of battleships in the face of evolving naval warfare. The HMS Hood, the pride and tragedy of the Royal Navy. HMS Hood, launched in 1918, was the largest battle cruiser ever built and a flagship of British naval power during the interwar years. With a combination of speed, firepower, and impressive size, Hood became a symbol of Britain's maritime dominance. Its reputation as an invincible warship was unmatched, making it a key element of British naval deterrence. However, Hood's design, emphasizing speed over armor, left critical vulnerabilities that would later prove disastrous in combat. The tragic end of HMS Hood during its engagement with Bismarck in the Battle of the Denmark Strait remains one of the most dramatic moments in naval history. A direct hit from Bismarck's guns penetrated Hood's thin deck armor, detonating the ship's magazine and causing a catastrophic explosion. Out of a crew of over 1,400, only 3 sailors survived. The destruction of Hood was not only a devastating loss for the Royal Navy, but also a stark reminder of the risks battleships faced in a modern era increasingly dominated by air power and precision weaponry. The Richelieu, France's advanced yet underutilized battleship. The French battleship Richelieu was an engineering marvel of its time, representing the pinnacle of French naval design. Launched in 1939, she featured innovative elements such as quad-mounted 15-inch guns and reinforced armor capable of withstanding contemporary naval firepower. However, the outbreak of World War II and the rapid fall of France in 1940 interrupted its completion and deployment. Initially stationed in Dakar to maintain French neutrality, the Richelieu's role during the early war years was complicated by geopolitical tensions. After aligning with the Allies in 1942, the Richelieu underwent significant upgrades in U.S. shipyards, modernizing its systems and enhancing its combat capabilities. Post-refit, it participated in Allied operations in the Mediterranean and the Pacific, demonstrating its potential as a formidable warship. The Richelieu's journey highlights the challenges of wartime neutrality and the adaptability required to remain relevant in a rapidly changing conflict. Though its wartime contributions were limited compared to other battleships, Richelieu exemplified the resilience of French naval power during a tumultuous period. The Vittorio Veneto, Italy's ambitious flagship. As the flagship of the Italian Navy, Vittorio Veneto embodied Italy's ambitions to assert dominance in the Mediterranean during World War II. Launched in 1937, it was a modern and powerful warship equipped with 9 15-inch guns, capable of engaging any adversary in the region. Vittorio Veneto was central to Axis naval strategy, participating in several skirmishes, including the Battle of Cape Matapan, where it clashed with British forces. While its heavy armor and advanced design made it a formidable opponent, fuel shortages and limited strategic coordination hindered its effectiveness. Vittorio Veneto survived the war despite the Axis naval defeats and was later handed over to Britain as part of post-war reparations. Its operational history reflects the broader challenges faced by the Italian Navy during the war, including logistical constraints and strategic isolation. Despite these limitations, Vittorio Veneto remains a symbol of Italian naval engineering and the complex role of battleships in the Mediterranean theater. The Yamato, Japan's colossus of the seas. The Japanese battleship Yamato was the largest and most heavily armed battleship ever built, a testament to Japan's naval ambitions during World War II. Armed with 9 18.1-inch guns, the largest ever mounted, Yamato was designed to outclass any enemy warship. Its massive armor and firepower made it a floating fortress, but it also represented a strategic gamble in an era increasingly dominated by air power. Despite its size and power, Yamato was constrained by limited opportunities to engage in decisive fleet actions. In April 1945, Yamato embarked on a one-way mission to Okinawa, intended as a desperate attempt to defend the island from Allied invasion. Attacked by waves of U.S. carrier-based aircraft, Yamato was overwhelmed and sunk before reaching its destination. The loss of Yamato symbolized the futility of Japan's reliance on battleships in the face of overwhelming Allied air superiority. It remains an enduring icon of both technological achievement and the shifting tides of naval strategy. The USS Washington, an American powerhouse in the Pacific. The USS Washington was a cornerstone of the U.S. Navy's battleship fleet during World War II. Known for its superior gunnery and resilience in combat, launched in 1940, Washington played a key role in the Pacific theater, particularly during the naval battle of Guadalcanal. In this engagement, Washington's precise firepower proved decisive, sinking the battleship Kirishima and securing a critical victory for the Allies. Its performance demonstrated the continued relevance of battleships in certain tactical scenarios, even as carriers dominated naval strategy. Washington also served as a vital escort and bombardment platform during subsequent campaigns, providing fire support for amphibious landings and protecting carrier task forces. Its operational success reflected the industrial and naval power of the United States, which was able to deploy battleships effectively aside its growing carrier fleet. As one of the last American battleships to see significant combat, Washington symbolizes the transitional period in naval warfare, where traditional battleships still had a role in the shadow of emerging technologies. Conclusion: the legacy of battleships. The era of battleships was one of innovation, ambition, and transformation, leaving a legacy that continues to influence naval history and strategy. These massive warships were more than just instruments of war. They were embodiments of the technological prowess and geopolitical aspirations of the nations that built them. From the early wooden warships of the 19th century to the steel giants of the 20th century, battleships evolved in response to changing threats and strategic needs. Though they eventually succumbed to obsolescence in the face of air power and missile technology, their impact on naval warfare remains undeniable. The battleship story is one of both triumph and tragedy, marked by iconic moments that define their place in history. Engagements like the Battle of Jutland and the pursuit of the Bismarck showcase their potential to dominate the seas, while disasters like the destruction of the HMS Hood and the sinking of the Yamato revealed their vulnerabilities. Their firepower and armor made them fearsome adversaries, but their size and cost often limited their strategic flexibility. Despite these challenges, battleships proved indispensable in shaping the outcome of conflicts, particularly during the World Wars when they served as both symbols of power and essential tools of victory. The decline of the battleship was not a failure of design, but a reflection of the changing nature of warfare. The rise of aircraft carriers, submarines, and advanced missile systems signaled a shift towards mobility, versatility, and range, qualities that battleships could not match. Yet their decline does not diminish their historical significance. Instead, it underscores the relentless pace of technological progress that defines military innovation. The lessons learned from battleships, from their construction to their tactical use, have informed modern naval strategies and the development of new generations of warships. The enduring fascination with battleships lies in their ability to captivate the imagination, both as marvels of engineering and as symbols of human ambition. Their stories, whether of heroism, innovation, or sacrifice, continue to inspire naval historians, enthusiasts, and the general public. Iconic ships like Bismarck, Yamato, and USS Missouri serve as powerful reminders of a time when battleships ruled the waves and nations placed their faith in these mighty vessels to secure their futures. Their physical presence may have faded, but their legacy endures in museums, literature, and the cultural memory of naval warfare. The story of the rise, dominance, and legacy of battleships is a testament to humanity's capacity for ingenuity and adaptation. They represent an age of transformation, where industrial and technological revolutions reshaped the battlefield and the world. Though they no longer sail into battle, the battleship remains a symbol of a bygone era when these titanic creations ruled the seas. Their legacy, etched in steel and history, reminds us of the ever-changing nature of warfare and the enduring quest for mastery over the oceans. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the TrackPads podcast. Don't forget to check out the TrackPads online newsletter, where we take things to the next level with multimedia content. Each issue features fascinating and informative photos, videos, and articles that bring the stories of the military to you in a dynamic and engaging way. Be sure to subscribe at newsletter.trackpads.com to stay informed and entertained.